Hey Brewtubers, happy Homebrew Wednesday. This will be take 2. I just recorded what I thought was a full video, but then I checked my camera and it wasn't recording. So let's start over, I guess. I was gonna start the video by apologizing for not posting so often, but just give the explanation that I may have given in previous videos. Is that nowadays I really don't get to brew that often for various factors, because the main one actually, which differentiates me from a lot of you, is that I can't, for religious reasons, I can't brew on Saturdays because the Sabbath, and we're not allowed to do a lot of different things, and brewing falls into those categories. And then Sundays, for those who have kids, know that a lot of Sundays are taken up with family-oriented activities, whether it's seeing family or taking people, going out places for shopping and other stuff, or just general household upkeep. So that's really my only day of the week to have time out and about with my family, with my wife and my daughter. And so when I do get to brew, it's all the stars have to align to make that work. So this past Sunday, I did brew. I brewed my first Witbier, so that's why I have what to post. So in the future, when I have what to post, I'll post. But I really don't have the time or the ability to get out to that many beer events like I used to when I was living in New York City and before I became a father. There's no really reason to apologize, because I'm doing as much as I can based on my constraints. I decided not to film Brew Day because I felt that because I hadn't brewed in pretty close to 2 months, I really wanted to focus on the brewing process and the use of all the ingredients that I was using that I had never used before in a beer. So I decided that I wanted to make this video more about recipe formulation, because we have a lot of brewers here that are new to brewing or intermediate or have been brewing for a long time and really trust the recipe formulation skills. So I thought that I would, especially with the Witbier, which has a lot of components, I thought within discussing how I made my recipe, discuss how I personally formulate original recipes. So while we're mulling over these details, I'm going to drink 6 Points the Crisp, which is a Pilsner. I've been drinking some craft Pilsners lately, and I just really love a classic, really well done Pilsner, and this is one of a few that I buy. I like to buy during this time of year, in the spring and summer. And I'm drinking it in my Prima Pils glass, which is the Victory's Pilsner from Pennsylvania, which is another one of my all-time favorite craft Pilsners. So cheers. So there's 3 main components to a Witbier, and of course you could focus on water chemistry, but the 3 main factors in my mind are: number 1, what percentage of the grain bill is going to be wheat. In this case, I used flaked wheat and white wheat. Some people use all flaked. And then what yeast you're going to use, and then what type of citrus zest or peel, and what spice, how much coriander and or other spices along with the coriander. So with my beer, I ended up having to go to 2 homebrew shops because I misweighed my grain originally. But for all intents and purposes, my recipe came out to 37.5% wheat, and I combined flaked wheat and white wheat, and then I used 10% flaked oats, because when I formulate a new recipe, I do a lot of research. Even if I'm brewing a new saison, I'll still search. If I haven't brewed a ton of saisons, I'll still search. Let's say I like brewing hoppy saison, so I'll search saison with Galaxy hops, for example, to see if someone tweaked their grain bill and to let the hops shine, or how much Galaxy hops to use without overpowering the yeast character. So for this beer, with the grain bill, which we're starting off with, I did some research. One of the main articles I used was written online, but from Brew Your Own magazine, which had the input of the brewmaster of Allagash, which is known for their Allagash Witbier, or Allagash White, I should say. And that recipe and a lot of other recipes has 45% wheat, but Allagash said to use wheat and some flaked oats. So in total, with the oats and the wheat, it's about 47.5%. Those really protein-rich, dextrinous grains, and then about 50% or so Belgian Pilsner malt, and then about 4 ounces of acid malt, which you don't have to use, but once I have harder water, it helped me with my match pH. Now, in terms of hops, I asked Tony Yates for some input when I was finalizing the recipe, because I could have gone like most other recipes with regular European noble hops, but I decided to combine those noble hops with a newer hop. So I used, for bittering, I used Tettnang. For the initial flavor charge of about 15 minutes left, I used an ounce of Saaz, and then in flame out for about a 20-minute whirlpool, or just steep, hop stand, I used an ounce and a quarter of Mandarina Bavaria, which is a hop I've come to really love. And when Tony said, "Oh yeah, Hat Trick," who's now a professional brewer, when he was in brewing school, he won a competition in his brewing school with a Witbier, which had Mandarina Bavaria. So I had some in my freezer, so I used that in flame out. And I'll use more if I need a dry hop. And then in terms of the citrus and the spices, the article that I mentioned before from Brew Your Own magazine, they recommended to use fresh zest instead of like the dried bitter or sweet orange peel, and added at flame out. So along with the hops in a hop bag, I added 2 ounces worth of fresh grapefruit zest and blood orange zest. So it was pink grapefruit, I should say, and blood orange, like 2 ounces combined of fresh zest. And it smelled amazing, especially the first day of fermentation, and everything was just like really, really active. And then for the spices, I used a lot of the articles, even Brewing Classic Style, said to start with 4/10 of an ounce of coriander, and for my special touch, some people add other spices too, and I decided to use 3/10 of an ounce of black pepper, because I love fresh cracked black pepper, and because the yeast already is hopefully gonna add some phenolic peppery notes, that just to kick up that kick of spice in the finish, I'd add a little bit of black pepper because I didn't want to overdo it. So that's what. And then with the yeast, of course, because Belgian beers are very yeast driven, even though kind of sometimes if you're looking at a wit beer, you don't always look at the yeast first because you want to know how you're going to get that coriander and citrus factor in. I decided to combine 2 yeast strains. I actually have 2 smack pegs here still on top of my keezer from a few days ago when I brewed. I cut off the number when I opened the pack, but the regular white yeast Belgian wit, and then instead of making a starter, I saw that they had a yeast strain that I've heard about before, which is the 3463, or the Forbidden Fruit, which is kind of nostalgic for me because when I was first getting into craft beer, when I was living in Israel after high school, like I said in my FABQ, I was trying a lot of Belgian and German beers, and one of them was a Hogarden beer, which I don't know if it's produced anymore, but it's called Forbidden Fruit. So when I saw they had that in stock, along with the other standard Belgian wit strain, I said, instead of making a starter, This is going to be a lower gravity beer. I'll just combine two smack packs. Now, in the end of the day, the brewing process went overall pretty smooth. I had some issues with the mash temperature towards the end of the saccharification rest because I did do a protein rest at like about 123 degrees because of the wheat, and then I did a sac rest at between 153 and 4 for a full 60 minutes. So towards the end of that sac rest, I had a little temperature issues because I realized it was losing too much temperature towards the end, so I added more hot water to raise it back up and just let it sit a little longer. But otherwise, the brewing process went well. And then at the end of the 90-minute boil, I realized that I totally overshot my target original gravity, which was 1053, and I hit 1060. But I could have watered it down, but just with all the extra spices and citrus and special hops that I added, I didn't want to risk watering any of that down. So it'll be a little higher ABV. Maybe more like 6% and change than 5 and change in terms of the ABV, but it should still be a pretty good drinkable beer because the yeast should dry it out enough to make it a nice, crisp, really fresh tasting beer. So again, of course, you have to take all the components, all 4 basic beer ingredients into account when you're formulating a recipe, but also in order to both, make sure you're keying into all the key factors for the style and creating that flavor profile you want in your head, that you have in your head. You're doing it smartly. You do as much research as possible, even if it means not just looking at recipes, but looking up. Like when I decided I wanted to add black pepper, I searched Witbier with black pepper, because otherwise I wouldn't have known what amount to start from, or how much fresh zest to use. I looked that up. So, and especially with home brewing, and a lot of beers, you could brew start with the base style, but then once you come up with a recipe, it's something totally different. When you're experimenting, like us home brewers do, you really want to do as much research as possible, whether it's articles, talking to friends, books, just to make sure that you're doing it as smartly as possible. Even if I've been brewing for quite a long time, I'm always trying new hops, new yeast strains, and stuff like that. And for that reason, because I want the beer to come out tasting good, at the end of the day, I'm going to do my research and to do the beer justice and create the flavor profile that I want. So I hope that was useful. If you have any questions on recipe formulation, obviously you can comment below or message me on Facebook or email me, whatever way you want. And now that I've brewed a beer, I can post an additional video or two on on the fermentation and of course tasting the final product, etc., etc. But I would love to do more beer mails and stuff, because they do have homebrew on tap and aging, whatever. I just don't really have time. I'm doing as much as I can, like I said in the beginning of the video, and trying to communicate with people online, and then post when I do brew and have material to post. So I hope you guys been enjoying everybody's videos. If I can, I will try to participate in this year's SJ Pour contest, even though it doesn't really tickle my fancy as much as other people. The whole layout, the whole structure doesn't tickle my fancy as much as I hoped it would. But I'll try my best to if I can brew around the time that the beers are due for the first round, then I'll enter at least the first round and see how I do and go from there. But again, I'll be posting as much as possible and enjoying the ride with you guys vicariously by watching your videos and seeing what you're brewing. So cheers and happy Homebrew Wednesday.